Hello, and welcome back to Humanity First. It really does feel like we are living in a nightmare on this journey to develop superhuman artificial intelligence. Anthropic, which is the company that was supposed to be the most safety conscious of all the AI companies, published their new responsible scaling policy, which is effectively a document that that they consistently publish and update that gives a bunch of if-then conditions as to certain commitments that they're making to AI safety, given certain capabilities that the models demonstrate. So, perhaps one illustrative example would be for biological weapons. So, the responsible scaling policy requires them to perform a series of tests on their models to get an idea about how capable their models are, how well their models understand biology and biochemistry. And if models pass a certain threshold on these tests, then Anthropic commits to certain additional testing that it will do specifically to try to minimize the threat of biological weapons. So Anthropic pioneered the idea of responsible scaling policies, and many other AI labs at the time followed suit. Of course, they were very careful to leave all the hard work for the future. Um, but even with that, at least there was some sort of legal guideline, some sort of thing that these companies would publish that we could refer back to and say, okay, um, uh, let's see if the companies are actually holding up to their commitments according to this document. But Anthropic just released their new updated version for responsible scaling policy. And in there, they essentially say that all the points that they put in there, that document is no longer internally binding. That they view the the policies outlined in their newest version of responsible scaling policies as goals to be achieved or guidelines for how they should develop their models or inspiration for what tests to conduct. But they do not consider this as binding. And the reason they give is that other companies are not adhering to the same standards. And ultimately, to compete, they might need to compromise on some of their commitments. So I feel quite conflicted about this. On the one hand, obviously, this is an absolute disaster. Like the fact that Anthropic, which is the most responsible of these frontier companies, far more responsible than OpenAI, and far, far more responsible than a company like XAI, for example, that they are in black and white reneging on some of their commitments to responsible scaling. This is a big blow. And it shows you the state of the field. But on the other hand, I am kind of, I actually do appreciate Anthropic doing this because it would have been pretty easy for them to just to reduce, to fiddle with the exact controls and commitments to make them achievable given the current climate, and then just not disclose that to the public. But they didn't do that. They set their commitments as to what they think is actually necessary to properly develop this technology, and they publicly acknowledge that they might not be able to meet the commitments that they make, which I think is the most honest way that they could have done this. So, yeah, but obviously this is yet another signal that the development of AI, how it's proceeding right now, is not is is dangerous. And just as we enter this phase where AI is beginning to really affect the real world, and you're getting increasingly powerful agents that are able to operate in the real world, this is exactly the point at which you should see more safety, not a loosening of safety regulations. This is exactly the point at which you should be taking safety seriously, at which you should be restricting development because of safety concerns or reasons, not getting rid of the few safety parameters that you have in place. But really, what this is a collapse of the safety architecture that people tried to build, that idealistic people in those companies tried to build under the first serious pressure. This was always the concern, that in this competitive dynamic, that as soon as the safety restrictions, as soon as those safety commitments became actually painful, became actually stringent, began to impinge on how quickly the companies could race with each other, that they would be dropped. And that's exactly what has happened. As soon as models started getting actually capable, so that proper safety would actually require some level of sacrifice or intentionality or resources, the companies just started waving away safety. So now the sad thing is, the companies, I do think that the companies will pay for this eventually. If there is a disaster as a result of their negligence, which I think there will be, they will pay for it. At least I hope they should pay for it. But the sad thing is, this negligence that they display now, it helps them in the short term, but the people that will suffer are all of us. So, so we should act now before there are problems down the line. Because ultimately, these companies waving away their safety responsibility and charging ahead, it will harm us. And might harm us to an extent that we can't even imagine right now. But okay, that's pretty much it. All that I had to say for today. But thank you very much for listening. And don't forget, winter's coming. Okay, take care.